how we doing? This is one of your hosts, Tyler Sturkey, along with my dude, Darren Hansen.
Hey, what's going on?
We are hosting today a very special episode of New Hope Underground, our series overview.
That's right.
Do this every once in a while. Also do it for our YouTube audience
Hi,
as
YouTube
well.
audience.
So
All three of you.
Note for
300 of you,
the
if you
audio. I just waved at the camera. And anyway, so yeah, I mean the name of this type of episode is pretty straightforward. Series overview, because we give a series overview of.
We do an overview of the series.
The next series coming up, and kind of just give people a little taste. Just to whet the appetite, just to stir the pot a little bit, just to stir some interest.
When you say whet the appetite, is it W-E-T or W-H-E-T?
I think it's H.
I think there is an H in there.
Wet.
Yeah.
Because
we need to use that form of that word more often.
Because it's like a whetstone. Because
Yes.
you almost hear wet and you think my appetite is dry and I'm making it wet, like
that's not
with water.
That's not.
But
really,
it's wet, like I sharpen my appetite.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be like a whetstone. So W-H-E-T.
Going back to the.
Yeah. Hey
what
guys.
do you call that? Etymology.
Good word. Use it. Learn it. Use it. Impress your friends.
Exactly.
But yeah. So series overview. We're starting a series this next Sunday, June 4th. That we're gonna go all the way through the end of July. It is literally almost the entire summer. I know once you get into August, people are kind of finishing out vacations and things like that, and already like thinking toward beginning of the school year and things like that.
And since it's in summer,
yes,
the title
is Summer on the Mount.
That's right.
You have any idea what we're going to be covering?
I'm assuming it has something to do with the Sermon on the Mount.
Ding, ding, ding! You are correct. No,
At least I better assume that. That's what I've been preparing for.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to be very prepared about something you're never going to use.
Well, that's not unusual.
Yeah. It's exactly like you said. We're going to be doing I think it's a 9-week series through the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to be hitting some key teachings and stories because, man, there's just a bunch of content in there. I mean, we could go for a very long time in it.
Oh, yeah.
But we're just going to, through the summer months, going to cover large portions of the Sermon on the Mount. And it just, nice play on words there. We named it Summer on the Mount.
Hey, we are creative, aren't we?
Yeah. So
that's enough right there to whet your appetite.
Yeah. So you usually toss this ball my way, so I'll toss it your way and probably catch you off guard. So why the Sermon on the Mount?
Oh, wow. Thanks. Well, I tell you what, it's when we're planning for the year, for different sermons.
Yeah.
I think one thing we will try to do is we just try to get into some Old Testament, try to get into some New Testament. We want to hit the Gospels.
Yeah.
Somehow. And I mean, Sermon on the Mount, I mean, come on. I mean, it's classic Bible. A lot of people are very familiar with it, but they're not always familiar with what it exactly means.
Yeah. Much of the sermon. Yeah, the Sermon on the Mount, I would say, at least big portions of it, are probably the most often quoted.
Yeah.
Even if they're maybe not always quoted in content.
In the right way.
In the right way or in context. It's the most well-known of Jesus's teachings.
Yeah, the Beatitudes.
And it's contained within Matthew chapters 5 through 7. Mm-hmm. So we'll be covering roughly 3 chapters of the Gospel of Matthew.
Which in Bible college, I had to memorize all 3 chapters word for word.
Woof!
And punctuation point for punctuation point.
Whoa!
Of course, they did Matthew 5 test, Matthew 6 test, Matthew 7 test. It wasn't all at once, but still it was good. I still remember. I mean, this is going back years. Of course.
What translation was it?
I think at the time,
probably everybody had to learn the exact. It was the same translation.
Yeah, I think we actually this is my freshman year of Bible college.
Okay,
and
so this was like 1800s, 1884.
Yeah, exactly. Way before.
Sorry, that was low hanging fruit. What did you think I was going to do?
You were in diapers, man. So, but I think the reason I put that into time frame because our Bible college had an official Bible, that we used.
Sure, yeah.
And they changed it in my sophomore year. So
really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So they went from my freshman year, it was the Harper Study Bible, which was RSV. Revised Standard Version.
Okay.
And then we switched to the NIV Study Bible next year. But anyway.
Probably
no one cares, but anyway.
Vastly. Well, I mean, still, when you say punctuation for punctuation, it's funny how with some translations, they can translate at least certain passages like almost the same way, but they put a comma in a different place. So like, that's what prompted that thought was, man, if you have to memorize punctuation, like you need to make sure you're on the same page.
ESV, which I use a lot now,
yeah,
really is the RSV. I mean, it's a warmed over RSV.
It's like the, not predecessor. What's the opposite of that?
Yeah.
The descendant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The offspring.
The offspring. There you go. It's the child. If a Bible translation could have a child, it would be the ESV.
Exactly. So yeah, I think there's just so many reasons for the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, one is, like you said, popular sayings that people have, not sure exactly what all it means, but also, I mean, you just think of Jesus and his teachings. And we don't know for 100% whether he taught all this at one time or Matthew's kind of putting the material together or whatever, but still, it's just become a very, very famous passage. But also, there's some things in there I think that are kind of skipped and ignored too.
Yeah, so, and it's interesting because large portions of that teaching show up in different form and in different order in Luke's gospel.
Yeah.
That there's, what is it called? The sermon on, or it's referred to as the Sermon on the Plain.
I think that's right.
In Luke's gospel, that it's not referred to as, because like the beginning of, because I started out teaching the first week of this, going through the Beatitudes, and it says he goes up onto a mountainside. So like, that's kind of where that reference, Sermon on the Mount, comes from, like that reference at the very beginning.
But it's probably not a mount like we think.
Right.
So,
but anyway, there's no reference to that at all in Luke's version.
Right.
So anyway, there's, scholarly discussions and questions of, which, if you think about it, Jesus going around from town to town, he probably didn't have brand new content at each town.
Yeah.
3.5 years of like brand new content. Most likely he preached similar sermons or taught similar things at different places he went because it was new. He didn't need new content because he had new people.
Yeah.
They needed to hear the same things and hear the same parables, which, because I've always heard people ask the questions of, obviously you did it in Bible college where you memorized a large portion, but this idea of like, especially people not knowing how to read or write back in the ancient world, like how would they memorize, especially like Near Eastern cultures being like oral traditions, oral cultures where they're passing on large portions of text word for word. Identical.
Oh yeah.
By memory. And so that idea of like how we can have like pretty good certainty that what we have recorded is what Jesus actually said is because it's an oral culture. The disciples likely heard Jesus teach and tell those stories over and over and over again, and they memorized them.
Yeah, yeah.
So then when it's like, oh, it's time to write it down, they're like, oh no, I know it verbatim because I heard it dozens of times as we went to different towns and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. Like that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I don't know how much stock's put into this, but I don't think anyone knows 100% where the Sermon on the Mount, if there was such, in one sermon. And we do know there was a sermon at this particular time. We put the timing in chronologically in Matthew and Luke. It probably was right there next to the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
Just in between Capernaum and the north side of the sea.
Sure.
Which is a plain.
Yeah.
Which really is kind of a plain. And this is when the crowds were following him and, get out of the boat and he had compassion on them. This is during a lot of that kind of, time. And I think the feeding of the 5,000 is close to this time. But anyway, there's just a lot of, major crowds following him. So whatever it was, like you said, the fact that these things were extremely memorable, the fact that Matthew would arrange them how he did and remember all that, and Luke.
Yeah. So, why do you, another question to put you on the spot. Why do you feel like Matthew arranged, like, why do you think the Sermon on the Mount, however it was arranged the way that it was? Like, do you feel like there were specific purposes behind it? And you're welcome to just muse out loud. I'm not expecting you to have like a perfect scholarly answer.
I do have I have a suspicion.
Okay.
Is that the best way to put it? I think. Because everyone has their ideas. That's the point
of the series overview is we're given some content and whetting WHET people's appetite for it so they can come into the actual series with even just a little bit of a foundation and background.
Yeah, I have a feeling. Now, I'm not going to get too specific, but in general, I think Matthew wrote with the chip on his shoulder.
Okay.
Okay. I had this theory or idea because when you start to read Matthew, you look at the genealogy, when he kicks off with, of course, he covers the birth of Christ and so forth. But Matthew, think about who he was. He was a tax collector. He was a Jew, but he was upset enough with his own people to betray them. Okay. So he had a problem. He had a problem with what was going on, and I have a feeling he had a problem with the hypocrisy of the religious leaders.
Oh, interesting.
Because when you what I mean is he himself, Matthew, and I really think when you start to read through Matthew, you get one fringe person after another. What I mean is the people that were always questioned, the fringe of society, Matthew and his friends, and then you not only that, but not just him and his friends, but the people who were who the Pharisees would point at and say, you have a bunch of sins, that's why you're paralyzed, or why you're, a leper.
Yeah, sure.
Think about the people he kind of talks about, and I think the teachings really, think about some of the meat of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Don't be like the hypocrites.
Yeah.
So I think Matthew was pointing to the teachings that, hey, this is the Son of God teaching, and he's lining up with things that I can get on board with, not what I think the religious leaders are.
Yeah. Well, him even near the beginning talking about, the changing of the law or challenging of fulfilling the law, different things like that, which I actually think that there might be a week where maybe you're going to talk around some of that.
Yeah.
So not to get too into the weeds around it, but it's like that's even pointing to the religious leaders probably had a very, especially the Pharisees, had a very particular way of viewing and obeying the law.
Yeah.
And the Sermon on the Mount, almost presents God's commands and life in the kingdom in a very different way. Yeah. And so that's this is Matthew's finally it's not enough that I just don't like these dudes because of how they treat people, and probably me included. But now I actually have something better that I can use to explain why.
Yeah.
And then to just present Jesus's teachings of presenting the law and how to actually fulfill righteousness in a real way. Well,
and he's the one with chapter 23.
Oh, the 7 woes. Yeah.
So I just think that there's a consistency through there, and I don't think the Sermon on the Mount was I don't think he included all of it just to prove a point, kind of thing. But at the same time, I do think there's a healthy chip on his shoulder, and that's why he remembers these things so succinctly.
Yeah. Those teachings were especially memorable to him.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why he would arrange it in that particular fashion, but they all have to me, they all have the same kind of sense, like Jesus putting things straight. How you viewed the law. No, this is how really God views the law.
And there's almost I'm trying to think if we're covering this part or not. I've heard people talk about that a lot of the Sermon on the Mount hinges around that idea where Jesus says to be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And what that Greek word perfect, we can hear it and think moral perfection.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily what Jesus is talking about when he uses that word. It is, but it isn't.
Right. It's is it teleos?
Teleos.
Yeah.
It means to be whole.
Yeah.
Or complete. That you are doing what you were created to do, or you are being what you're created to be. It'd be like if a car is teleos, it means it's running like it was created to. And so showing how, and then Jesus spends a lot of time talking about the inner dynamic versus the outer dynamic of appearing righteous outside, but not on the end. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and we'll be hitting that in different weeks throughout it, but of saying, no, this is, and this goes back to the Shema prayer. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That was more than just a claim of monotheism, and it was. We serve one God, but of saying he's not divided. He is one being through and through, the same in every dimension and aspect of who he is. He is the same person. You don't catch him on a bad side or catch him on a bad day. He is one. He is whole. He is teleos, and you should be as well. And the Sermon on the Mount shows, ideally in God's kingdom, this is what it would look like. And I
think it's so good. I think there's also a degree, at least in my head, and I think this is what Matthew, I think, kind of salivated over too, was that there's a degree of Jesus saying the things that he said in the Sermon on the Mount makes you believe that you really are lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I love the very first beatitude. You know, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? It means to be totally, those who are totally bankrupt. So he leads in with that.
Yeah.
And I can see Matthew going, I love it, because it's like, okay, you think you're so good, these righteous people, because you've never committed adultery, but you've lusted. You've never committed murder, but you've hated. And we all are guilty of those things. So it's like, now it doesn't mean that there's nothing to attain to. It's just that, like you said, to be what God has created us to be, there's a freedom in that.
Yeah.
But to realize that we can now do it because of Jesus. I mean, that's just
well, it does. And I remember, and you've talked about this before, and I didn't want to steal your thunder if you're wanting to talk about that some. And I know you're going to probably talk about it some in your message too, of the Sermon on the Mount not being...
Wait a minute, I'm going to write this down.
Yeah. Here, let me tell you what you were going to say.
Good, I need that.
No, but you've said it on many occasions of saying that the Sermon on the Mount isn't so much of, all right, here's just a list of moral commands you're supposed to follow.
Right.
I mean, there's an element in which that's kind of true, but it was actually also meant to be this almost eschatological thing of like this kingdom that is... Because this is what's interesting, is in Matthew 4:23. I mean, this is literally just a couple verses before. It says that he came into the region of Galilee and began to announce the good news of the kingdom. And then it shows the Sermon on the Mount of saying, like, in some ways he's announcing, and I kind of get into that. Spoilers for everyone who's listening. I get into that a little bit.
Hey, if you're listening, you deserve a spoiler.
I get into that a little bit in the first week about how... especially the Beatitudes, like its connection to the announcement of good news. But really the Sermon on the Mount as a whole, I mean, that's almost prepping people for what the rest of the sermon is, that just like kingdom or Jesus started the reign of God in his death and resurrection, his coming ministry and his death and resurrection, that it has begun, but it has not consummated yet. The Sermon on the Mount almost parallels that of saying, these are things that we can begin to pursue and follow, but you're probably not going to fully live them out until the kingdom has consummated, like the age to come has fully arrived. Does that make sense? And would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that.
I literally, just as we're talking, made that parallel between what you've said in the past. And I'm like, ooh, there's like a parallel with the Sermon on the Mount and its purpose with the kingdom itself. Well, it's like, I wonder if he's making that point when he says that.
Aaron and I were talking about this because of a youth conference. They're trying to put some stuff together for Sermon on the Mount. And we were talking about this.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to tell them, I mean, just for anybody who's listening, that's kind of cool about youth conference.
Well, yeah.
Youth
conference is actually going to be covering the Sermon on the Mount as well.
Yeah.
And so we'll be in the middle of that series while that's going on.
We didn't even do that on purpose.
No, hey, God does stuff.
Just a coincidence. Don't let it build your faith.
Don't let it build your faith. But we were talking about this. There's a healthy paradox. There's always a paradox to everything. It seems like it's like, yes, you can attain to these things, but no one's perfect, and no one's gonna be perfect.
Yeah.
So in other words, you can attain, but you can't. But you can through the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, these things are coming. This is the kingdom, progressing, and it's here but not yet.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think the thing is like. I think what I keep hearing in the Sermon on the Mount anyway from me over and over is just this, like this isn't God's, a lot of things you guys confuse yourself about what that blueprint of God actually is.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Because, and it's almost, it's like he said in, like you said, 4:23, and also what he said to John the Baptist when he was questioning, are you the one to come?
Yeah.
Remember what he told him? Report back to what you've seen. The blind see. He's going back to Isaiah, 61?
Yeah.
Is it 61? And that's so I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's something about, and I think Matthew makes this point, in my opinion, there's something about Jesus and the coming of the kingdom is in Jesus, And the fact that we even have the freedom to be able to be what God had created us to be.
Yeah.
Is remarkable, and that's come because of him.
It's super
and in his teaching. So I think we're seeing. I mean,
No, I agree.
I totally agree with what you
I
said.
love it. That's so good. But yeah, I'd like that. Anyway, that parallel I just thought of. Thought I'd float it past you since it originated from something that you said, but it made me think. How dare you make me think?
That was really good, though. That's really good.
But cool.
Wow, this could be a great series.
I know. Like I said,
Now we're not hitting everything.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to do everything. But I feel like we're hitting almost all of it.
But we're hitting some good stuff.
Big chunks of it that I think are going to be really good. But yeah, June 4th through July 30th. I know it's easy to be gone and travel in the summer, but man, if you can make it each week and maybe watch the ones you can't.
That's right.
I think it's going to be really good. But yeah, I'm excited. So I'm starting the series out, and you'll be following the second week, and then we got everybody involved in this series taking turns, and I think it's going to be a good series.
Be a good one. Little tag teaming.
That's right.
Like usual. Good stuff. Hey, tune in. And also make sure you get back here on New Hope Underground because there's going to be some good stuff coming up. Make sure, if you haven't subscribed, do.
Oh, speaking of that,
yes.
Sorry, guys, I'm sorry. I almost forgot. Something we will be doing this series for Summer on the Mount. Sorry. But I hope that doesn't get confusing. We are going to, much like we've done in previous series, like whenever we did the Book of Ruth and several other series we've done, we are going to have weekly supplemental podcasts coming through New Hope Underground, where whoever is speaking for whatever week, like this probably dropping next week, will be myself. And not to spoil things, but for those who are watching this, it deserves to be spoiled. My wife is going to be joining me.
Oh, great.
So that'll be fun. And so we're going to kind of take a second look with fresh eyes after the sermon. Try not to like double cover content. But basically what we'll do is whoever's speaking will invite a guest on, and we'll just go a little bit deeper beyond what you can do 30-minute sermon and dive deeper into each of the texts. So if you're just randomly seeing this and you've not subscribed to New Hope Underground, do it, especially for this series. We'll have weekly supplements to each message.
And the idea is that for that to drop on Sunday of the day of the sermon.
Yeah. So it should, the Sunday, like this Sunday when I preach, I don't know what time they normally do it, but it should drop that Sunday. So
it drops that Sunday, but sometime during the week, when you're driving or working out or something during the week, click it on, you know, because it's just some more information to reinforce what you just heard on Sunday. So it's going to be fantastic.
Anyway, series is going to be good. I think the podcasts are going to be good. It's just a whole well-rounded thing that I'm very excited about. So we will see you guys this summer with Summer on the Mount.